Yo guys, and welcome to a new video. Today I will be ranking down the entirety of Phase 1 of the MCU. Alright, so this video may come a little random because, well, there's obviously nothing with Marvel and especially not Phase 1 coming out now or in any future. So why did I decide to release this video now containing all of Phase 1 of the MCU, which ended 13 years ago? Well, the big reason for it is that I have wanted to rewatch the entirety of the MCU for months now. So one day I was talking to my friend Igor and we decided to start this journey together to rewatch the entirety of the MCU all the way from Phase 1, Iron Man, to wherever the MCU will bring us on the end of our journey when we eventually get there. That does include everything. All the movies, all the series, all the miniseries, all the specials, all the one-shots, just not the Defender saga. We're skipping that because that's not an official part of the MCU. It's not an original part of the MCU. Even though titles like Deadpool and Wolverine and Daredevil Born Again are mostly sequels to their respective universes, they will be included here because they are definitive Marvel Studios productions. So no, don't expect any Spider-Man or don't expect any X-Men in this either. Maybe if they make an X-Men movie until we are done with this, yeah, then we will include that one. But they will not be in those rankings ultimately. They will not be in here normally. And when I was watching these movies, I ultimately also decided to take you on this journey with me as well, because you deserve to know my feelings and my fan favoritism of this Marvel universe by heart as well. You all know I am a big fan of these movies, so I thought I should maybe give you some insight on all of the movies and all of the shows that have come out over the last 15 to 16 to 17 years even. So today I will rank down Phase 1 and in 2 weeks time I will also rank down Phase 2. After that you still have to wait because we are still very busy with Phase 2 and Phase 3, and afterwards you will have to wait a longer time because those other phases are just long as fucking hell and we will need a lot of time to watch those. We watch around 3 movies to / 1 show in the future a day. So hey, you know, we are busy people. We don't have time every day, so we have to plan this accordingly. But before we start, I first have to say something about Phase 1 of the MCU, because obviously for these rankings, it's a bit of a mix-up of a series between RANKTASTIC, between the rankings, and I Rewatch, where I conclude everything about a franchise and talk about the entire franchise as a whole. I will talk about Phase 1 for a bit, and I do feel like Phase 1 is very strong, but also the most problematic of the Infinity Saga. Not the entirety of the MCU, just the Infinity Saga. Not all of these movies are great. You can definitely see them trying to find their hook still until the moment they found it in the Avengers. So yeah, not everything in this phase is great. Not half of the movies in this phase are great. I do think they are all unique in some capacity or way, but I do have an opinion about all of them. I am also officially ranking them with a point system that I have awarded to it based on its story, its pacing and its designing, its characters, its rewatchability, but also the interconnectivity between the movies of the phase and between the movies of the entire saga, the musical score and my personal score. Especially around the end of the Infinity Saga, where we have like 19 to 20 movies in the franchise already, it gets really difficult to rank them all down. So this point system helps me to allocate a favorite place for each of them. But with that being said, let's get straight into the first 6 movies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And in 6th place of Phase 1, I have decided to put the Incredible Hulk. And whenever I rewatched this movie a couple of times, I still thought that this movie was getting better and better and better every time, but it still was very, very problematic, and it's my least favorite of the entire MCU, so putting it in last place just feels like the correct move for this franchise up until this point. I do think the story of this movie is very weak. I do think Edward Norton is not the best choice for the Incredible Hulk, and the movie did not serve him any purpose beyond just having him rage, and the story wasn't really that good for him. The pacing and designing, the movie I don't think the movie looks quite nice. I do think it's a headache of a movie on the contrast side of things, and I do think it's a headache of a movie on the editing side of things, and I also think that they tried to make this movie go as fast as possible, but it didn't really work, and it felt a little slow, and the story was a little bit confusing because of those parts, and the characters were mostly annoying. I only really liked William Hurt in the role of Thunderbolt Ross, and for the rest, that's not even it. That's about everything I liked about this movie and everything I hated about this movie. I'm just not the biggest fan of The Incredible Hulk, and I do think it's the most skippable of all the movies. I don't think you're ever gonna miss anything if you don't watch this one. Well, maybe if you rewatch the Captain America Brave New World movie, that might change, but you know, in and of itself, The Incredible Hulk is not that great. I'm going to give it 2 stars. In 5th place, I have Iron Man 2. And I have to say, this one, it's pretty complicated. I have a love-hate relationship with it. Some of the parts I absolutely love, and some of the parts I absolutely hate, and I absolutely despise. Like, there's this entire depression story within Tony Stark, which could have been great. It's a mental instability, it's mental health that is portrayed in the movie, which is really important nowadays. And I do think the movie did not portray that side of Tony Stark very well. They tried to do a lot with it, and they tried to make it as good as possible, but the best thing they had to come up with was him peeing in the suit on a party for his own birthday. I guess okay. Of course, we also have Don Cheadle taking over from Terrence Howard, which I think is a pretty damn good casting choice, because Don Cheadle absolutely rocks and absolutely nails the choice, and having Scarlett Johansson in this one as Black Widow for the first time and having Samuel L. Jackson return as Nick Fury is also very great. So the movie definitely has some grades, but mostly that depression story and a lackluster story for the rest does make sure that this movie is just not as interesting as you would hope it is. Whiplash is a very mediocre villain. We have a very cool suit in the briefcase kind of thing, which was awesome in every way, and I absolutely love that scene in the Monaco Grand Prix, which was just one of the best fight scenes out of the entire movie, and it was only 2 punches long. The entire last part of the movie, the last act with the Stark Expo, didn't really move me. The rest of the movie was just a bit there, and Justin Hammer also really didn't do it for me in this one. I do think we're going to see him back in the Vision series. I am not sure about that though. So I am kind of excited to see the guy back, but for now it was just, meh, it was just there. I'm gonna give this one 2.5 stars. I did like it more than I liked The Incredible Hulk. In 4th place, I have a movie that I initially thought was pretty bland and pretty bad, but upon rewatch and rewatch and rewatch, I do see myself loving this movie more and more every time that I watch it. And that, of course, is going to be Thor, the first one, obviously. Not the second one. The first Thor is just a fun little adventure movie. It's okay. I see the problems with it. I see where it has too much of these Dutch angles, and I do see the problems with the story and with the characters, but I do think that Loki and Thor are pretty damn great assets in this movie. I do think Jane Foster is not that interesting. Eric Selvig is not that interesting. Darcy wasn't yet that interesting, but she was getting there, and she was absolutely the best part of the movie based on the comic relief side of things. I do think Odin is pretty fun in this movie, but mainly because, well, throughout this franchise you're gonna see that whenever someone starts screaming at Odin, the man just faints. You have to pay attention to that. It happens in this movie and it happens in Thor: The Dark World. He always faints. It's pretty fun to see. That little scene that he had with Loki, where Loki was, "What am I?" He said, "You're my son. What more than that?" Pretty damn fucking scene. Holy shit, I love that scene. But him fainting in the end because Loki was screaming too hard at him, it's just funny. It's just funny. I love that. And I have to say, the entire story about redemption and feeling worthy, yeah, it's a little bit weird that he just can be stripped away of his powers and then he can have them back, and I still don't know how Mjolnir or Jonathan works, but you know, that's not a problem because the movie in and of itself does a pretty solid job at solidifying Thor as the central character, and in this one you can definitely see the line of being worthy for that hammer. I do feel like in the rest of the MCU the line gets blurred because Thor does a lot of more things that are questionable, where I can say that some other characters like Captain America or like maybe a Peter Parker or stuff like that might be able to live Mjolnir as well, because, well, they do some pretty great stuff as well, more than Thor even. But in this one, it made the most sense for me. In this one, they really put the most attention to it, which is why I actually kind of really like what they did with the movie. It's not the most rewatchable of them, but it's definitely kind of a good one if you pay attention to it. I'm going to give Thor 3.5 stars. I have always been a sucker for Captain America, and Captain America the First Avenger is no exception to that rule. I know this one is not the most popular of these movies, and I know this one isn't the best of these, and I can acknowledge all of these facts. That doesn't deny the fact that I still love everything in this movie. I love the humor, I love the message, I love everything that they do with it. The only thing that holds this movie back from being great for me is that the story is a little bit all over the place. Like, we have Captain America, we have this little skinny kid that becomes Captain America, which was an awesome scene, and then they put him in the army, and then they mostly use him as some sort of mannequin and some sort of mascot for the entire war, and as a propaganda thing, which is a very logical and probably a very American thing to do, but that was also the least interesting part of the movie. And the movie really picks up the pace when he tries to save his squadron, whenever he tries to release the 105th? I forgot the name actually. I don't know, I don't know, the Howling Commandos, his brothers in arms, where Sebastian Stan was also a part of. That was literally the best part of the movie. Whenever he gets to be Captain America, whenever he gets to do those things, only then to have a little bit too much going on in the end with the flying ship and everything happening on there, and the Tesseract, which I am not the biggest fan of, if I have to say so myself. I think it was a little too cosmic to put in this movie, to put in a grounded World War II story, so that's my main thing with it. But I like the story, I like the characters, I like the pacing, I like the score, obviously. I do think Captain America has a great score, and I personally really liked what they did with this movie, if only the story would have been a bit more fleshed out and a bit more narrowed down. I'm going to give Captain America the First Avenger 3.5 stars. The number 2 on my list, Iron Man, may be one of the most favorite movies of the MCU for a lot of people, but I have to say that I personally do not feel that same thing. I do think it's a great movie, I do think it's a pretty damn fucking good movie, but I absolutely don't think it's the best one. I would put a lot of movies over this one, and just because it's the first one that kicks it off in its entirety, the original start of the MCU, is not enough for me to give this one extra points just because it has that status. Upon rewatch though, I love it more and more and more. It really showcases you a big chunk of the personality of Tony Stark and a big chunk of where he might end up later in 2019 whenever Avengers Endgame happens. A lot of those branches are already planted in this movie, which is great. The story is just awesome to see. It's just cool to see him become the Iron Man. A thing that brings this movie down a lot for me is the lackluster villain in Obadiah Stane, and just them taking a little bit too long to get to the actual great parts of the movie. And I also think the third act of this one is not the most interesting, is not the best of them, is not the most memorizable of these third acts, which is why it's taken down a bit as well. I do think it's a pretty decent movie, but for me personally, it's nothing more than a 7 out of 10, like 3.5 stars and maybe even a heart. So I do think it's not that great in that regard, but I still love this, and it gets better and better and better upon rewatch when you pay more attention to it. And I do think the original Iron Man may cater better to older fans than it does to newer fans. I think this one is more made for young adults and more made for teenagers than it is for kids, which is something that is very obvious watching this movie. I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars and a heart, because it does kickstart off everything. Okay, yeah, I don't think it comes as a surprise to anyone, but The Avengers, of course, is on number 1. Or in the UK, it's called Avengers Assemble, apparently, which is something I did not know. But, well, it is. It's called Avengers Assemble. I thought it was because of the British show or the British movie from 2000 that they had. It was also called The Avengers, which starts, I have to think about it, a very famous guy. Ray Fiennes, Uma Thurman, and Sean Connery. If you haven't seen the movie, well, I suggest you do with it what you want, because I haven't seen it either, but it exists, and it's also called The Avengers. Maybe that's the reason why in the UK it's called Avengers Assemble. I have no idea. Most of the world knows it as The Avengers, and I love this movie. It's awesome. It's great beyond reason, but I also have some flaws with it. I personally think this movie is the least rewatchable out of all the Avengers movies, and I do think this one has the most problems with it. Most of that has got to do everything with, of course, the pacing that they had to do. The pacing is more slow because they had to build up everything yet. It was the first time they came together, so they had to build up a team, and they had to build up a working team, and have to build up those brackets of banter and of friendship that were needed to be put in place, and some of these references, and having the characters get from A to B within a logical time limit and stuff like that. So I do think this movie is great, and I do think this movie has a lot of awesome character moments. I also think that especially in the first and second act, this movie does take a really long time to get going. And especially as a kid, I wasn't the biggest fan of this movie because I loved the third act, but I also had to watch the first and second act to get to the fun stuff. As an adult, that's definitely not the case. I love this movie for what it is. I love what they did with the story. I love what they did with the characters. I do think everything in this movie makes sense, and as you get older, the entire story starts to make more and more and more and more sense, which is something I also deeply love. So yeah, in the end, The Avengers is just a phenomenal movie. It has its pacing problems. It's not the most rewatchable movie. Is it greater than Age of Ultron? Also yes, but Age of Ultron blanks out in other parts, but fails in yet another parts. So they interchange a little bit. I do think The Avengers is superior to a lot of movies, and I do think this one is a great send-off for 4 years of movie making already, and it was a great culmination that worked extremely well, especially in the third act when you get to see them coming together, and whenever they are standing in a circle right in front of Grand Central Station, you know you're in for something good, and you know these are the Avengers. The music is great, the entire story is great, these characters are great, and if you weren't a fan of these characters before, you're definitely going to be now. I'm going to give The Avengers 4.5 stars and a heart. It's awesome. Alright, but that was my ranking of Phase 1 of the MCU. Before I go on, I just want to say that my list isn't the right list, so please put in the comments down below your list. Let me know what you thought of these movies, and let me know what your personal ranking of it is, alright? Thank you guys for that, and I would like to see you in the next video. Phase 2 will be coming in 2 weeks, which will go from Iron Man 3 to Ant-Man, having the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy and Captain America Civil War and Thor the Dark World all in there. I have some opinions on these movies. They are great. They are big. Alright, stay tuned for that one. Stay tuned for the rest of my content. If you want to see more videos of me, please consider to give me a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you, and bye-bye.